Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Top 10 Voice Actors in Star Trek. This is a Patreon requested video requested by patron Norman Buchwald. It's also part of a series of videos in which I've been doing where I count down my top 10 favorite actors in Star Trek. I've done lots of various top 10s in that case. And this is, I believe, the last one in that series, at least for now, where I cover my top 10 favorite voice actors in Star Trek. Now, this isn't just for animated shows. It could be any role in this franchise where there's just a voice acting, so you don't actually see the actor on screen. It's just, something they do in a booth and a voiceover, so it's strictly voice work. Which is a really reputable and hard field. It's a hard thing to do. It's not just you get in a booth and you say your lines. It's actually difficult to do voice acting, and you have to, some ways, more difficult because you have to just rely on your voice and not your gestures or hand movements or anything. So, it is a very reputable field in its own right. And so, I'm here to count down what is, in my opinion, my top 10 favorite voice actors in the Star Trek franchise. Now, this list was very, very hard to put together because it was hard for me to try to think of, outside of animation, what roles were just voice actors and which ones I thought would be good enough to be in this top 10. Now, a few things I will have to say about the top 10 before I get into it. It doesn't feature any actors from the animated series. I do consider the animated series canon. I mean, kind of, sort of. But it's mainly because I don't think any of the actors from the animated series deserve to be in here. Because the animated series, and that's more of a fault of the animated series itself, where the scripts were just, the dialogue was very stilted and and not written very well, and so the voice acting wasn't really anything I think that needed to be commended. Also, I love actors like Nichelle Nichols, George Takei, and James Doohan, but I'm sorry, they were not professional voice actors, and they're not that good at doing different characters that aren't their main characters. And Mel Barrett as well. Although she appears in my list for something else, but not for the animated series, because I'm sorry, but they were all very bad at trying to do voice acting for different various characters. So, so you won't find any animated series voice acting on here. What you will find, however, and which was very hard, but I had to be honest with myself, this list will be dominated by Lower Decks. I tried to think beyond Lower Decks, but I'm sorry, Lower Decks is just so good, particularly at voice acting. So I'm sorry, the Lower Decks dominates this list, which is, I think, inevitable. Because, I could try to cut back on Lower Decks, but then that would be being dishonest. Because really, I think that's where all the best voice acting is in. So now, as I've done for a couple of these other top 10 videos I've done, I'm going to start with a few honorable mentions that didn't quite make my list. I'm just going to run through the list of honorable mentions, just say their names and just move on without saying anything about it, so the video is not too long. But when I get to my top 3 honorable mentions, I will get in a little bit more detail about them, and then get into more detail, of course, when I get into my top 10. Alright, so let's go ahead and start it off with my first honorable mention, which is William Daniels, who does Hospital Ship 4-2, the Allocation Alpha, that is from the Voyager episode Critical Care. Then there's Earl Boyan, who does Nagilum from the TNG episode Where Silence Has Lease. Then there's Jason Mentozokas, if I'm saying that correctly, who does the voice of Jacob Pod from Prodigy. Then there's Deborah Wilson, who did the voice for Lisa Cusack from the Deep Space Nine episode The Sound of Her Voice. And then there's Vic Perrin, who does the voice of Nomad from the original series episode The Changeling. and which is the only appearance of the original series on this list, because most of the original series voice acting is the typical 60s sci-fi bullshit. I found Nome was kind of like that, but yeah. Anyway, next honorable mention is Noelle Wells as a Devani Tindy from Lower Decks. So now getting into my big three honorable mentions, we'll start with my first one, Eugene Corduroy, who does the voice for Sam Rutherford from Lower Decks. Does a pretty damn good job of Rutherford. He's a okie dokie, and does a fairly good impression of Mark Twain as well. And as Lower Decks, a lot of Lower Decks are really high on my list because there's a lot of dynamic to the voice acting that they have to do. He has to portray, very enthusiastic, but sometimes he's scared, sometimes he's worried, sometimes he's arguing with a past version of himself who's a totally different character. So yeah, Eugene Corduroy did a very good job with all of that, and also pretty good in Loki. Anyway, next honorable mention is Dawn Lewis, who played Carol Freeman. Again, it has a lot of dynamic acting. A lot of times she's really silly and up herself, but you get the dynamic of this captain who just wants to do better, and I think she shines the most in the scenes with her daughter and the arguments she has with her and just trying to be a good mother. That is always done very well. And then my final honorable mention is Ella Purnell, who plays Gwen on Prodigy, who I think also does a really powerful job with this character, who is playing, again, a range of emotions from having abandoned her father and seeing her father as a negative force in her life, but then coming to terms with who she is and where she came from, and also her new friends. I think she plays those all very well. Alright, so now we'll get into my top 10. And again, this is hard because all the ones I just talked about so far were all very good, so it was hard to narrow this down to 10. So we'll start with my number 10, which is Roxanne Dawson, who is probably better known as playing B'Elanna Torres, but since I'm talking about the voice acting here, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm specifically picking her out as her roles as the Dreadnought computer voice in the Voyager episode Dreadnought, and her doing the voice of the alien repair station computer from the Enterprise episode Dead Stop. Episode in which she directed. But anyway, she did the computer voice for it. And I think in both of these cases, she did a really good job as doing a creepy computer voice. In the case of Dreadnought, she was supposed to have the voice of B'Elanna Torres, so she was playing B'Elanna Torres, playing off of her own computer voice. I'm sure it was a different voice on set, probably just an AD reading the lines or something. But once it was edited together, you see her playing off of her own voice. And I think it's done really well, especially being a flat computer voice, but at the same time being this horrible villain who's trying to kill her, basically, and trying to stop her, and being really obtuse and refusing to listen to reason. So I thought she did a good job playing that. Maybe even a slightly better job in Enterprise. And the episode Dead Stop, not a huge fan of the episode, but one of my favorite aspects of that episode was her computer voice and the way she's being very, friendly sounding, matter of fact, but basically creepy as fuck and scared the whole time when people start dying and Archer starts yelling at it, and then she's saying, "I'm sorry, your inquiry is not recognized." Like, it's a simple performance, but it was like really punctuated and done very well. So I had to put her in my top 10. So next, we'll move to my number 9, which is a classic. Absolutely had to recognize her. Mel Barrett as the computer voice. Now, she played the computer voice for Starfleet ships in multiple shows, in Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager. I don't think so much on Enterprise, but those major things, and didn't appear much in Deep Space Nine because usually they were on Deep Space Nine. They had the Cardassian computer voice, which was played by a different actor. But then when you wanted Defiant or your Runabout or whatever, you had or at various other Starfleet ships, you had her do the computer voice. And usually she, again, very simple, matter of fact, you could say it's an easy performance to do because she's just got to be a flat computer voice. But I think she does such a great job. She adds some sort of dynamic into that computer voice, saying that so and so is not on board the ship. Computer, locate Commander Riker. Commander Riker is no longer on the Enterprise. And just that kind of sort of matter of fact, and especially some episodes. Like when you have Geordi or Chief O'Brien talking to the computer, she becomes a very important part of that conversation, and I think she does a really good job. And I'm also thinking this moment in Voyager where the Doctor's having an illusion, I think a daydream, and had the computer voice, Mel Barrett doing her computer voice saying, warning, warp core a lot closer than you think. Better get moving, Doctor, if you want to be a hero, which sounded a bit like Roxanne Troy in that line. But no, I think it was good. She does such a good job in this. I had to put her in my top 10. So next, we'll get into my number 8, which is Jack Quaid as Brad Boimler. Again, getting back to Lower Decks, you have the classic Boimler scream that he pulls off very well. But again, a lot of nuance, a lot of emotions. I think maybe one of his best performances is in Crisis Point Part 2 over in Season 3, where he was going through a crisis of faith as he found out his transporter double got killed, and it was sort of bothering him, and he was sort of losing his shit, and eventually had to be talked. Had a heart-to-heart with Mariner, where he reveals all that. And it did an amazing job, and he pulls off a lot of hard scenes, and even doing his evil twin, which I want to see more of. And yes, I think he's a really good voice actor. So next we'll get into my number 7, which is Kate McGrew as Hologram Janeway / Admiral Janeway in Star Trek Prodigy. Gotta love Kate McGrew. I think her voice acting is just as good, just on par with her great, in-person acting in Voyager. I think she knows the character of Janeway backwards to front, and you can tell how much she's able to portray and throw of that just by doing a voice performance. And again, not all actors would be great at of making the transition from live action to just voice acting, and I think she does an amazing job at that and does it really well. So next, we'll get to my number 6, which is Gabrielle Rose, however you pronounce that, sorry, who does the voice for T'Lyn in Lower Decks. Getting back to Lower Decks again, this is something I talked about. I talked about her in my top 20 favorite actors of modern Trek, or top 10 favorite actors of modern Trek as well, because yeah, she's really good at doing the Vulcan stuff. And Vulcans are hard to do because you have to portray a lot of sort of emotions between the lines, in the subtext, between the Vulcan exterior of being simply strictly logical. And I think she does this extremely well. And you add on the extra difficulty of just having to use her voice to do it. I think she does this extremely well of portraying someone who at times is frustrated because she doesn't want to be there, and then her journey to learning to accept being there in her place on the Cerritos. Yes, I absolutely thought she did an amazing job, and I can't wait to see more from her. So next, we get to my number 5, which is Annabelle Wallace, I believe it's pronounced, who does the voice of Zora on Star Trek Discovery. Yeah, so I had to put her on here. She does the Zora, which is the computer voice of Discovery, who eventually takes over Discovery and becomes this own sentient, intelligent being controlling the ship of Discovery. And and I think she does a really amazing job. Again, she has that flat computer voice most of the time, but is able to portray a lot of emotions through simply doing that computer voice, which is a very difficult thing to do. And I think really shines in the episode But to Connect, where she is her sort of sentience is at risk, and you're talking about shutting her down or removing her from Discovery when she refuses to follow an order. But yeah, the way she portrays and follows through that is, I think, really good. Showcases how good this voice actor is. So next we'll get to my number 4, which is Agnes Emme, who does the voice for Zero on Star Trek Prodigy. Does a really good job, in my opinion. I think Zero is probably definitely one of the more interesting characters on Prodigy. I mean, my favorite, and part is the way of how the actor performs. This voice does this performance of a character who is supposed to be a non-binary character, so I think does a very good job of not sounding particularly masculine or feminine, but also portraying a lot of emotions, and especially when Zero, who is a Medusan, accidentally makes their friend go mad, and their reaction to that I think is played very well, and throughout of being a very sort of one of the more inquisitive voices on the show, I think works extremely well. So next we'll get into my number 3, which some people may think is silly for me having this actor this high, but damn, I like this actor, and is a veteran of voice acting on animated shows, and I am of course referring to Paul F Tomkins, who plays Dr. Migaloo on Lower Decks. Mainly just a comedic performance, and one that's, just as, a recurring character who doesn't appear that much, but whenever he does, it's always hilarious. It's probably one of the most funny characters on this show, and it's probably a lot of that credit does go to Paul F Tomkins, who did the voice for Mr. Peanut Butters from BoJack Horseman. Is mainly where I know him from, even though he is also a well-known comedian as well. But I mainly know him from that, and he did such an amazing job over on that show as Mr. Peanut Butters, and he brings that, particularly the comedic side, to the character of Dr. Migaloo, whether he's, calling his Meemaw just to let her know that he's in command of the ship, or he's having a battle with a replicator, or whatever it be. I think he does is just a pro at doing comedy so well. So next, we will get into my number 2, which, again, some people might think is a bit silly for having him this high, but I'm sorry, I had to have him this high. My number 2 second favorite voice actor in the franchise is Jeffrey Combs as Agnes. I am a little bit biased towards Jeffrey Combs because he is an amazing actor, and he does such a good job as Wayun in Deep Space Nine. He also played Brunt, but who cares? But he did such a good job as Wayun in Deep Space Nine, and in Shran and Enterprise, and to see him again in another Star Trek show is so good. But this time, I should say, hear him again would be more appropriate, doing the voice of Agnes, who's only appeared in, 3 episodes. One was just like a couple lines at the end of one episode, but 3 episodes. And I love this character so much. This character is the supercomputer who's evil and always trying to take stuff over. And yeah, Jeffrey Combs, the way he plays him, is kind of typical of an evil computer. But come on, he brings such nuance to this evil computer, and really, I think, delivers the lines and makes them so much funnier than they would simply appear on one page, about how he's always evil and trying to take stuff over and trying to trip people. It's just such a delight. And I really want to see more of this character. And goddamn, Jeffrey Combs is just so good as Agnes. I think maybe might be one of my favorite characters he's played in the entire franchise. I'll even put it that way, up there with the Wayun and Shran. Just saying. Definitely better than Brunt. Anyway, we will now get to my number 1 favorite voice actor, best voice actor in my opinion, of the Star Trek franchise, and that is Tawny Newsome as Beckett Mariner. I just think she does an amazing job as Mariner, and again, playing a lot of the different nuance in the character. Again, is very good at the comedic side of playing someone who's silly and over the top, although she will probably tell you, as she said in interviews before, that she's essentially playing herself because that is Mariner's personality is so close to her own personality. But and maybe that's why she does such a good job, but she does an amazing job of the talking fast and whatever, but still making it not too annoying and not too sort of hard to follow. It's still easy to follow, still done very well, and the comedic timing is really perfect. And more than that, again, the range of emotions these characters in Lower Decks have to go through. Mariner probably more so than any other character on the show, from her dealing with her tragic past that last season tackled, that deals with why she doesn't want to be promoted, and having the difficulties of having her mother on board, and trying to avoid dealing with these emotional situations, and the way she also deflects, but then is there to stick up for her friends. We have tender moments between her and Boimler several times, and also, of course, sometimes with Tendi and Rutherford as well. Just the dynamic they have is very well. So she had to be my number one, Tawny Newsom. So thank you so much for watching my top 10 best voice actors of the Star Trek franchise. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment if you would like, and check out all my other stuff. As I said, I've done every month I've been doing other various top 10s for different actors, top 10 actors in the Star Trek franchise, top 10 modern Trek actors, top 10 one-off guest stars. So check all that out, and check out my channel, as I'm at the moment covering Star Trek The Next Generation. I think just wrapping up season 2, and then going to start season 3 pretty soon. And I also cover many other videos and many other Star Trek videos as well, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.